So trying to connect it to these previous two talks, this is focused on the mobile data capture, some of which was described by Ramesh, although his are more intensive, body-worn. A lot of our focus is leveraging the smartphone as they are, but increasingly as these other data streams become available, those would be included as well. There's a lot of really good work going on in the wireless health world, which is looking at more and more interesting ways of body-worn physiological capture. And this is what I'll be talking about is a little bit more complementary in looking at what we can infer and make use of off of the mobile phones as they are. So there's a little bit, you know, dichotomies in all worlds. They come together in some way. The other major theme, which is very consistent with what Ramesh was just saying, which is about trying to create tools that people can use to support whatever kinds of health, wellness, or disease-related conditions they're trying to do. So I think there's a fair amount of commonality that way. When I'm talking about mobile health sort of here and now, where it's different types of data coming into play off of existing smartphones. Tends to be, if you guys know, how many people in the room, experience sampling is a term everybody uses? Yeah? Photovoice? So in some sense, what smartphones give you are the ability to just do a lot of really the marginal cost of doing experience sampling and Photovoice combined with some more passive monitoring. It's a lot of, you know, older techniques from social science. So location time-triggered surveys is just smarter, more usable ways of doing experience sampling. So Photovoice is having people tell stories about things in their environment that might relate to a particular health impediment or something else through systematic use of photography. And now that everyone's walking around with not only a camera, but a camera that timestamps and geocodes and uploads automatically, it makes the notion of having people participate in creating Photovoice-based stories, and whether those stories are about environmental and social issues or around things around themselves. It's that same kind of making systematic documentation and then interpretation from that data, something that can be more a part of our regular practice.
Is this going to replace time motion devices?
You know, so I want to be careful about replacement term, but I think in many contexts where you don't need super fine-grained accuracy, this is at almost a zero marginal cost, letting you get time, activity, location traces to support. And everything that we do in this context is patient-centric in terms of the interaction, the app, and the data gathering, although data from it, I will talk about very importantly how that can come into the clinical process. Okay.
One
yes.
related question. So it seems like there's an incredible amount of value in just knowing what, you know, where it is, doing the timestamp and doing the location stamp, right? And
yes.
So I'm just wondering.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
What's that called when you're just tracking people that way?
Yes.
As opposed to having them take a picture too.
Yes. So why didn't this happen to the rest of you? Give me 3 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
You're just special.
Yeah. I do it to other people. They're giving back to me. Okay. So when you think about leveraging, mobile phones, okay, it's about smart experience sampling. So your phone can do time, location, help you remember that I now want to be monitoring what is my symptom level around my dizziness that I associate with my high blood pressure medication, or what is my stress level. Easy to do. Just think of this as mobile Survey Monkey. Really easy to configure your own personal sort of inventories. Everything is always time-stamped, location-stamped, and automatically uploaded. Lighter forms of that actually came for us through focus group examples. When you're stressed, you don't want to be answering long questions about being stressed, so we have a phone top stress button. The notion being that you don't always have to answer lots of questions, but just by tapping a certain button, you note that at this time and place, I'm marking a stress event. Or I'm marking an unintended eating event, meaning I'm not going to track my whole food inventory, but I might start a practice of trying to note when I eat something that I know I actually didn't have it in my head to eat that day. So these are, right? Yeah. What is with you guys? Yes, exactly. Now we get to passive monitoring. So phones have rich sensors on them that were put there for other reasons, okay? But they can give you a fine grain, traded off with how much battery you expend on it, activity location trace. So the accelerometry on the phone won't give you the same resolution of information as if you're using an actigraph or if you're wearing a few body-worn sensors. It's not going to tell you if you're limping, okay? But if you want a measure of within minute, hour, day, or week, how sedentary are you? When are you actually moving versus sitting in place or in a car? Very high accuracy in doing those estimations. So virtually free to capture continuous activity, location, traces about, and then all sorts of things you can think about inferring from that. A fatigue marker, a depression marker, right? What time am I getting up and going to work in the morning? How much am I holing in on the weekends? Am I actually starting to walk around less? Have I stopped crossing streets? Dobkin at UCLA uses that as a good example of, can I get across the street before the light changes, right? You can start to see in my traces whether the radius of my life has shrunk. All sorts of rich things we can pull out of those traces. And then, importantly, just phone-based activities. So not talking about elders as much, but think about the demographics that have chosen phones as their personal devices. Much of their life is mediated through the device. So think about pulling off text analysis off of their texting. And again, them having tools to pull off text analysis, right? Negative, positive speech valence. Pitch during phone conversations, right? And tools that you might give them, little cognitive control tests, go, no-go tests on the phone to look at my in-person variants as I'm managing my ADHD medication. Or in an example I'll tell you about in just a second, PTSD Coach, an application developed by the VA, really excellent one, a set of self-management tools for people with PTSD. So when I'm talking about smartphones, I'm talking about these kinds of data streams. Some just a smart, low-burden form of self-report, passive monitoring that give you things about activity location out of which we can develop personalized markers, and then phone-based activities because they're done on the phone as opposed to somewhere on a piece of paper elsewhere. You have data from those. So you can see if somebody's running that guided relaxation tool and when during the day are they running the guided relaxation tool. Okay. That's the type of data I mean. Questions? Never get them when you ask. Okay. So very importantly, it's not just about the mobile app. The mobile is just this useful vehicle that's on the people, right? So it's on me, it's with me, I keep it charged, I use it for all sorts of other things, and therefore it's proximate to me. And, but it's about what you do with that data. So it's always about what's going on a data store. Hopefully, I can do a separate thing, and we don't have time now, about privacy, right? And the way I would like to see privacy architectures emerge here. Hopefully this is private data. It ends up in a private data store in the cloud someplace, just because phones get dropped in toilets and lost and things like that. And I want to be able to look at what was happening last month when my sleep was better or my asthma symptoms were worse or my stress levels were more manageable. And we pull that data back. And really in mHealth, we're trying to do it in the following way. By having tools that are serving self-management, by it being a tool that people use, but then from the data from that tool, you can feed back useful perspectives and inform behavior change and the sorts of just understanding that Ramesh was talking about. But taking that same data and having it be able to come into the clinical encounter as it has been referred to here before. And then, as again with opt-in permission and all of that, we will increasingly have data about how people do self-management. So there's that third loop of what we understand from research ways. But we're very interested in starting with patient-centered tools, taking data from that to the clinical encounter, and taking data from that to serve research, as opposed to thinking of it as a research tool from which we get data from patients. That's just more our perspective. And all the challenges and a lot of the research to be done is in the sense making from the data. By this point, relatively easier to get that data as opposed to making sense of it. So we sort of think of the mHealth applications, all those apps you see on the market and that you hear about other in clinical context starting to be rolled out. Those are about the capture, and where a lot of the work, and we see a lot of opportunity for iterative progress, is in the sense making. I want to just make this concrete and just use this PTSD Coach as an example. PTSD Coach was developed by the VA and in collaboration with the DoD. Incredible woman named Julia Hoffman really has been making this happen. And they did focus groups with somewhere between 50 and 100 veterans talking about how they do self-management and what from their cognitive behavioral therapy has been useful to them and what are their challenges in self-management. And they designed, and this group of therapists designed and had created an open source application. It's a tool for people to use in between their therapy appointments to help them develop and support their self-management tools. It's portable skills to address their symptoms. So that was PTSD Coach. I had nothing to do with it aside from having the good taste of realizing how great this group is and their application. And so what we're doing is now we're working with them on a project whereby we're capturing the data from that application. Because they were pragmatic and they did not the application does not deliver data back to a clinician, PTSD Coach. They were pragmatic and they knew there were too many policy hoops to jump through to get the VA to start collecting that level of data. So as a side research project, we are capturing the data from the application use. What tools is the person using, when and where? What are their symptom severities? Because before somebody can use this PTSD Coach to just rate their symptoms. And if they tell something about their symptoms, they'll be guided to a tool. Or they can go directly to a tool. There are like 4 different relaxation tools. There's a prolonged exposure tool. And now, how they get there and how long they spend in that tool and how they rate their symptoms afterwards is all now data. So this data gets pulled back to the cloud. There's feature extraction from that data. And then it's presented in a, this will be in a pilot in March, so I'm having a little trouble with my tenses, okay? So it's code being written now for this to be presented, but I want to be clear about that. That it's being, we worked with the clinicians on what kind of data views do they think might be useful to them, both to review their panel of patients during the course of the week, but moreover when they're walking into therapy, to get a quick status. How has this person been doing? What has their week been like, been relative to previous? What have their symptom levels been like, and where have they been spending more time with the application? As a tool to help them with therapy as a point of status and as a point of departure in discussion. This is small iterative loops. They don't know what they want to see because they've never seen this kind of data before because it's always been self-report. So we're just trying to do something modest, get it out there to them, and begin that iterative process, which is what the useful way of doing, the powerful way of doing IT development, is that you start with something simple and small, you see how people are using it, and you plan to go out and adapt it. And so that's what we're doing with PTSD Coach. I won't go into this, it's too, the idea of open mHealth is that we have a very simple framework by which lots of people in the world would say, oh, I have a cool activity classifier that pulls data off of low duty cycle accelerometry coming off the mobile phone. Oh, I've developed this interesting fatigue marker for people with MS that I've tested in this sort of a community, and here's how you pull off of these mobility traces, something that has actually been shown to work as an interesting fatigue marker for people with MS. You pull off in different demographics. We shouldn't all be recreating those things. If those are small modules, then that becomes something that we can all mix and match. And that still a lot of role for commercialization, but as with the internet, it just moves commercialization up higher in the stack. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the sort of metaphor for the internet of its architecture being based on an hourglass, but it's very important in that the internet defined very minimal things you had to do to become part of the internet. And those things haven't changed in all these years. Yet technology has changed so radically. And the applications became things that nobody anticipated. You know, even Engelbart, way back then, okay? And the way that happened is because what defined being a part of the internet was a way of encoding an address in a data packet. And all these applications could build on top of that, and the underlying bandwidth for moving the data and everything could move again independently. But you still had the connectivity to the rest of the system. So the idea here as well is if we have modular ways of defining these different tools that we're going to use over our data sets, then as people come along with better body-worn devices down here in the stack, and as people come along with some proven validated marker for a depression marker when it's comorbid with you know, diabetes in women between 32 and 53, right? then those all become tools that you can use and bring into your particular thing, but you've let it live in an ecosystem where you have a lot of commonality. So Open mHealth is an RWJF and California Healthcare Foundation funded effort to try to seed and catalyze a community whereby which there would be a lot more sharing of tools and a lot more reuse of these more commodity components. And I'll just, one more thing I wanted to add to that is something I mentioned at the previous session, is that Ida Sim, my colleague in all of this, is also working with others, you mentioned N of 1, on trying to take these N of 1 techniques and start to build some tools on top of this for what they call a personal evidence architecture. So if you let people start to do this kind of, okay, I went to my portal and I found out that I could either take over-the-counter antacids or try some new pharma-based medication to help with my acid reflux. I'm not sure which one to do. Is there some systematic way in which I might go through a 2-week or 1-month-long trial of one versus the other? Or maybe the first step there, as somebody mentioned earlier, was eliminating dairy and spicy foods. So the notion of giving people some tools with which to do some systematic exploration of what works for them is the kind of methodology and set of tools that we hope would emerge in this kind of a structure. End.